Hi guys, welcome back to the Literary Archives. Today is first chapter, first Friday, and we are going to be reading and discussing The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. Let's dive in. The Moon is Down is actually one of Steinbeck's lesser known novels for reasons I don't fully understand. It was published in March of 1942 amidst World War II, and it was actually published as a piece of anti-fascist propaganda. At that time, Steinbeck was working for the Office of Coordinator of Information for the United States, and he met several refugees from Norway, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and France. And all of the stories that he heard from these refugees influenced what he wrote in The Moon is Down. When it was published, Americans largely praised it, but some found it way too sympathetic of the Nazi Party, and they actually began to question Steinbeck's anti-fascist views. However, in Europe, hundreds of thousands of copies were translated and distributed, and in Nazi-occupied territories, possession of The Moon is Down was actually a death sentence. That raises the question of, why is this book so important to the people living through the darkest days of World War II? And why is it a book that's just as poignant and important in our modern lives? The Moon is Down, Chapter 1. By 10:45, it was all over. The town was occupied, the defenders defeated, and the war finished. The invader had prepared for this campaign as carefully as he had for larger ones. On this Sunday morning, the postman and the policeman had gone fishing in the boat of Mr. Carell, the popular storekeeper. He had lent them his trim sailboat for the day. The postman and the policeman were several miles at sea when they saw the small, dark transport, loaded with soldiers, go quietly past them. As officials of the town, this was definitely their business, and these two put about, but of course the battalion was in possession by the time they could make port. The policeman and the postman could not even get into their own offices in the town hall, and when they insisted on their rights, they were taken prisoners of war and locked up in the town jail. The local troops, all 12 of them, had been away too on this Sunday morning, for Mr. Carell, the popular storekeeper, had donated lunch, targets, cartridges, and prizes for a shooting competition to take place 6 miles back in the hills, in a lovely glade Mr. Carell owned. The local troops, big, loose-hung boys, heard the planes and in the distance saw the parachutes, and they came back to town at double-quick speed. When they arrived, the invader had flanked the road with machine guns. The loose-hung soldiers, having very little experience in war and none at all in defeat, opened fire with their rifles. The machine guns clattered for a moment, and 6 of the soldiers became dead, riddled bundles, and 3 half-dead, riddled bundles, and 3 of the soldiers escaped into the hills with their rifles. By 10:30, the brass band of the invader was playing beautiful and sentimental music in the town square, while the townsmen, their mouths a little open and their eyes astonished, stood about listening to the music and staring at the gray helmeted men who carried submachine guns in their arms. By 10:38, the riddled 6 were buried, and parachutes were folded, and the battalion was belayed in Mr. Carell's warehouse by the pier, which had on its shelves blankets and cots for a battalion. By 10:45, Mayor Orden had received the formal request that he grant an audience to Colonel Lancer of the invaders, an audience which was set for 11 sharp at the mayor's 5-room palace. The Moon is Down is about an unnamed village that is invaded and must obey the soldiers who report to the leader. At first, the village is very confused by the invasion, but eventually they build a resistance and unrest. And as their resistance to the soldier grows, the soldiers find themselves detesting the village and longing for home. This novel is only 112 pages, but within that 112 pages, you find yourself rallying behind and rooting for the invaded. At the same time, you find yourself beginning to sympathize with and pity some of the invading soldiers. Although the village, the invaders, and the leader all remain unnamed, it was clear who they were intended to represent. Steinbeck expertly describes the village like a small, close-knit Norwegian village, which he later admits was his actual intention. And he describes the enemy in a way to where they clearly represent the Nazis and the leader represents Adolf Hitler. Because Steinbeck wrote it in this way, even though it's clear who he intended these unnamed people to be, the message behind this novel can be applied to any occupied village and territory throughout history. Let's take a minute to talk about the significance of the title itself. The moon is down. This is an allusion to Macbeth by Shakespeare. And at the beginning of Act 2, Banquo asks his son, "How goes the night, my boy?" And Fleance replies, "The moon is down. I have not heard the clock." In Macbeth, this implies a coming doom, the coming of darkness, and that same significance is brought into The Moon is Down with the coming of the soldiers and the invasion. There is another connection to this allusion in the middle of the book in which Mayor Orden is talking to Colonel Lancer and he's distracted and he keeps describing the snow is coming, and the falling of the snow outside. And I don't want to say much more, but when you get to that point, keep the significance of the title and the allusion to Macbeth in mind. And I think you'll see much more beauty in that moment. The Moon is Down is a beautiful piece of literature that expresses the importance of freedoms. Towards the end, the mayor of the town, Mayor Orden, states, "Free men cannot start a war, but once it is started, they can fight on and defeat. Herdmen, followers of a leader, cannot do that. And so it is always the herdmen who win battles and the free men who win wars." Throughout the entire book, the villagers are fighting back and trying to defend the freedoms that the invaders took from them. At the same time, the soldiers are longing to return home and to reclaim the freedoms that they left behind. And I think what Mayor Orden says is perfectly encapsulating of the difference between a man who acts on the word of another, such as a leader, and a man acting on his need to defend his own freedoms. The latter will go on to win wars, and when freedoms are stripped, the free men must win those wars in order to reclaim them. For the teachers out there, if you are interested in teaching The Moon is Down to your students, there is a teaching guide available on Teachers Pay Teachers that I have put together for you, and it will help you guide your students deeper in the discussion of some of the important meanings and allusions within this book, plus much more. So check that out if that's something you're interested in. I'll leave a link below. If you haven't read this yet, put it on your list, grab a copy, and do so. It is well worth your time. As always, thank you for tuning in to First Chapter, First Friday. Like and subscribe so you never miss a literary moment, and I will see you guys next time. Happy reading.